Shalom. This week we are reading Parashat Chayei Sara. Parashat Chayei Sara opens with the death of Sarah, matriarch Sarah, and Avraham's mourning for her, his eulogy for her, and his acquisition of the Marat HaMachpelah, the double cave in Chevron, to be burial place for her and for himself as well. You know, if I had to define the whole concept of Judaism in just a couple of words, just on one foot, if I wanted to somehow, in a very concise way, capture what the whole thing is all about, I would have to say that the goal of the Jewish experience, the goal of being attached to the Torah, is the sanctification of, and indeed the celebration of life. And that's exactly what the character of Avraham Avinu, our forefather Abraham, is all about. And everything about Avraham was about the celebration and the sanctification of life, but the sentence is not complete. It's about the celebration of, the sanctification of life through action. The Torah is extremely action-oriented. And everything about Avraham Avinu, especially when we look at his overwhelming character trait of chesed, of looking all the time for opportunities to bestow good in the world, to do good deeds, that was his way of imitating godliness, of bringing godliness into this world. And that is absolutely, for him and for us, the apex of what it means to be a Jew, to try to do some good in the world. So that was his whole reason for being. And it becomes a sanctification of life, and it becomes celebratory by doing good in the world. And the reason why this is so important to understand is because Avraham Avinu was up against a lot of things in the world, a lot of trends that were going on in the world at that time. People who believed, just as so many people today believe, that, you know what, there's really nothing that you can do in this world, and you don't even have to try to do anything in this world, because the fix is in, and either you believe this way and so, and everything's going to be okay, pie in the sky, or you don't. That's not what Avraham and Torah and Judaism is all about. What he taught us is that we make the world into a better place. So it's interesting how the whole Parsha, Chayei Sara, begins with this, what might be seen as a disproportional amount of attention that's played to the subject, that's paid to the subject of Marat HaMachpelah. You know, Chayei Sara begins in chapter 23. The entire chapter, the entire first chapter of this parasha, is totally taken up with the arrangements for the acquisition of the tomb of the patriarchs, Marat HaMachpelah, in Chevron, to be an eternal resting place for Avraham Avinu, and as we know, also for first and foremost for Sarah and for Avraham, and as we know, Yitzchak and Rivka. But only two of the verses, the first two verses of the chapter, are actually concerned with the death and the mourning and Avraham's eulogy for Sarah. But no fewer than 20 verses, the entire chapter, is totally taken up with everything that Avraham Avinu went through in tremendous detail to make sure that he would legally acquire the tomb of the patriarchs, Marat HaMachpelah, as we know, with the double cave in Chevron, acquire it forever. So some might look at this and might think, this is very strange. This is, you know, not fitting of the character of Avraham as we've now defined it. Avraham Avinu, he is all about the beauty, the perpetuity, the eternity of life itself. Again, to be a Jew really means to celebrate life by sanctifying life through action. And this whole fixation that Avraham had, I mean, 20 verses, the entire chapter is all about arranging this burial place, as if like that is the most important thing. So some might think that this is, morbid or, depressing or somehow, morose, because it is totally centered on these funereal arrangements. Truth is that nothing could be further than the truth. The whole reason why Avraham is emphasizing this, or rather why the Torah is testifying to this entire process and making this such an issue, is specifically because of Avraham's attitude about life and what he wanted to imbue into us, into his children, into the future generations. From the time that Avraham became aware of Marat HaMachpelah, of what it really was, according to our sages, they tell us in the most amazing passages, the Holy Zohar and our sages in the Midrash tell us that Avraham became what you would have to say obsessed with this cave. I mean, as soon as he found out about it, as soon as he realized what was going on there, that, as our sages tell us, Marat HaMachpelah is the entrance to the Garden of Eden, whatever that means, and that he perceived that this is the resting place of Adam and Chava, of Adam and Eve, as soon as he became aware of this, he developed some sort of tremendous longing and yearning to be buried there himself. This is in the words of our sages. The way that they put it is that he actually wrapped himself around this, and it absolutely dominated his thoughts from that time on, that he has got to get that place. What does this mean? Why was it so important to him? A man that is so totally dedicated to this world, to bringing the Spirit of God into this world. I mean, his entire career at great pain and at the cost of his life, and under life-threatening circumstances, his entire life was about making the whole world aware of the importance of this world, the importance of God in this world, the importance of realizing the nature of this world and God's presence in this world. And here we have this, it seems to be something of a turnabout, such a tremendous attention to these arrangements for death. And he just wanted it so badly. And another thing that the Zohar tells us, which is also very telling about Avraham's relationship with this mysterious place, Marat HaMachpelah, the burial place of Adam and Chava, the entrance to Gan Eden. How did he first discover it in the first place? And it's amazing to realize that this was in the ownership of one Ephron Hachiti, and the previous owners were idolaters, and they have literally under their nose the entrance to the Garden of Eden, and yet they're totally oblivious to it. They have no idea what they have. They have no idea whatsoever of the importance of this place. How did Avraham discover it? So we have a verse in last week's Parashat, in Vayera. It's actually chapter 18 and verse 7, when Avraham had these three visitors come to him. He thinks that there are three idolaters. They're actually angels. The first thing that is of concern to him is to prepare a beautiful banquet for these men. So verse 7 of chapter 18 tells us that Avraham ran to the cattle. He ran to prepare this sumptuous delicacy for these men that involved getting a hold of the cattle and slaughtering it and preparing it and making it into a feast. So according to the Zohar, actually he's, I have to say, hobbling in a very feeble way, because remember that Avraham just gave himself a circumcision at the age of 99, and this is actually the third day after the operation, when, according to medical science and Jewish tradition, is the most painful time. This is when Parashat Vayera, last week's Parsha, opens up. God comes to visit him, and then the three men come, and he's suffering, but as we already learned, he is more concerned about offering these men a meal than in his own health and well-being, and even in talking to God, as the Parsha opened, because he wants to imitate God. So he's running, and he's chasing this cow. The cow is bolting. V'el ha-bakar ratz Avraham, the verse says, chapter 18 and verse 7. Avraham ran to the cattle. One of them ran away from him and is running and running, and he's running himself after this cow, and it goes into this cave. Goes into Marat HaMachpelah. This is the first time that Abraham becomes aware of this place. He discovers it because a cow ran in there, a cow that's going to become a meal for one of these angels. Goes in. According to the Zohar, his unbelievable description, he's overwhelmed by this unbelievable radiance that's coming forth. He goes in and he feels that this is something very special, and he knows that this is not of this world. This is an interface. This is the entrance to paradise, and he perceives there Adam and Chava, no less. Adam and Eve themselves. And he says, I have got to get one of these. I have got to get this place for myself. And as we already know, every time we are confronted with the timeless, inimitable, inscrutable, perfect words of our sages that come down to us in this uninterrupted tradition, we know that we're not just dealing here with poetic license and with homily and with analogy. We are dealing with all of those things, but the point is that these words are not anecdotal. None of the statements of our sages, even if they seem to be just stories, they're not anecdotal because they are imbued with a tremendous depth of insights. And we're always advised never to get caught up in the form of the vehicle itself, of the story, but in trying to understand what is the lesson. So what are our sages emphasizing to us here? That by telling us that Avraham was so head over heels obsessed with this place, that it's the burial place of Adam and Chava, and that the way that he discovered it, I mean, is this important for us to know? Is this not seemingly quite anecdotal? I mean, is this a children's story? Avraham discovered it because that day, back in 1807, in Parashat Vayera, when he's running after the cattle to prepare the banquet for these angels, one of them runs into there, and that's how he discovered it. What is this all about? It's actually an amazing theme that's being woven for us here, and it will shed a tremendous amount of light and understanding for us to be able to realize, no, this is not an obsession with death at all. This is not disproportional, what's going on in the beginning of Parashat Chayei Sara. Because what these teachings of our sages are emphasizing to us, these two themes, they're actually the very nature, the very character, the very essence of what Avraham Avinu is all about, and thus they explain his behavior regarding Marat HaMachpelah, and they also explain something to us about our identity in this world. You know, this Shabbat, traditionally, the Shabbat in which Parashat Chayei Sara is read, Shabbat Chevron. It is a Sabbath when traditionally the Jewish people show their identification with the city of Chevron, which, after all, is the first Jewish city in the land of Israel. The spiritual connection between Jerusalem and Chevron is incredible. King David reigned for Chevron for 7 years before he was king in Jerusalem, which emphasizes something of the spiritual conduit. So this Shabbat, we're going to have countless thousands of Jews that are going to spend the Sabbath hospitality of the residents of Chevron and Kiryat Arba, because they want to show the depth of their feeling and allegiance to their parents, to the forefathers, and to that beleaguered community. And how ironic that in this very week, in the week of Shabbat Chevron, the week of Marat HaMachpelah, which of course our sages tell us that there are 3 places that the Torah actually goes out of its way to testify, to bear witness that these 3 places that were actually purchased and a contract actually appears in the Torah, as if to say that later, when people will rise up and question our sovereignty and the right of the Jewish people to these places, even though God promised the entire land of Israel to the children of Abraham through Yitzchak, these three places, the Torah testifies, were purchased. And of course, those three places are the tomb of the patriarchs in Hebron, and the Temple Mount, and the tomb of Joseph in Shechem. So this very week, the week that we're reading Chayei Sara, and the week of Shabbat Hebron, when so many Jews will converge on that city, we have a statement made by the Catholic Church that the Jewish people have no biblical connection to the land of Israel, and that God changed his mind. All previous promises have been have been canceled, and the Jewish people should not use their biblical claim to the land, and therefore we should implode, etc., etc. So this is actually amazing, that during this very week our connection to the land of Israel is questioned in such an organized fashion, in such an official statement. And we won't go there about what that represents at the moment, what that represents. But consider this and compare this statement to the statement that the Talmud makes in Tractate Bava Batra, that when Avraham died, the day that Avraham Avinu passed away, all the leaders of the world stood up and wrung their hands and cried. The day that Avraham Avinu passed away, the world's leaders stood up and they said, "Woe to the world that has lost its leader. Woe to the ship that has lost its captain." Emphasizing to us that the leaders of the world really understood the tremendous debt of gratitude that they have to Avraham for what he brought to the world and for taking them out of the soup that they were in, as far as their misconception of godliness in this world. So Avraham Avinu's obsession, as it were, with securing the tomb of the patriarchs was not just about the future and securing it for his children, which it was. And it wasn't just about the spiritual connection with this place, which it was. You know, if one does not believe in the next world, this world has absolutely no significance. If one does not believe in the perpetuity and the eternity of life itself, then this world has no purpose either. And if one only believes in the next world, then this world also has no meaning. And it was only Avraham Avinu that got it right. But let's look again at these two themes that the Zohar is emphasizing to us. He felt this tremendous yearning and longing because he perceived that this is the burial place of Adam and Chava. And from that moment, he wanted to be there. His soul, his very soul, pined and yearned that this should be the place for himself and his children. And how did he find it? He found it when he was chasing after a little calf that ran in there that he wanted to prepare for his visitors. This is not about death. Avraham Avinu's focus on securing the tomb of the patriarchs is not about death, it's about life, and it's about forever. And the reason that he wanted it so badly is his connection to Adam HaRishon. His connection to Adam is that he is the one who set the record straight. Avraham is the one, as Ezekiel says, one was Avraham. God says, there was only one Avraham in this world. Avraham got up and brought the world to recognition, brought this knowledge to the world that there's only one God. It had been lost. It had been lost since Adam, and Avraham is the continuation. Avraham is the one who is restoring the legacy of creation that should have been Adam's. He's restoring it to all the children of man. But why did he want it so badly? And how did he discover it? When he ran into the cave, and after that calf, this is not a meaningless story, and it's not just a tale. The idea is, he deserved it. He deserved to be the continuation of Adam because of his desire for chesed. Abraham's entire conception of godliness in this world is through the lens of kindness, of loving kindness, of bestowing goodness upon other people. This is how he perceived God in the world. This is how he perceived the purpose of creation, and this was his life's work. So what the Zohar is really telling us is that he discovered it not by accident. He discovered it on account of the fact that his entire life's work was chesed. Of course, his chesed, in the form of a little calf that he's running after, straining, hobbling feebly after this operation, his chesed is what led him to take his proper place next to Adam HaRishon. Do you understand what this is saying? These things are all connected. It was Avraham Avinu's desire, his unquenchable longing to do kindness in the world that brought him to the place that Ephron HaChiti was ignoring, totally oblivious to, like, hello, the entrance to paradise is in your field. What's the entrance to paradise? It's taking responsibility for this world. It's continuing where Adam HaRishon left off. It's reminding the whole world that there's only one God and there's only one purpose. And the reason that Avraham Avinu deserved that place was because he took upon himself the responsibility for man. It's not a privilege, it's an obligation. And that's why he's the continuation, and that's why he is the tikkun, because he ran there pursuing his kindness, and he realized that by elevating the world through kindness and imitating Hashem, that is the tikkun, that is the rectification of Adam HaRishon. How ironic that as we read these words, and as we prepare to show our affinity, our spiritual heritage coming from Avraham Avinu, that once again, those powerful forces in the world that are totally about eradicating and uprooting and denying what the Jewish people have accepted upon themselves, the responsibility for the world and for all humankind. We're hearing those voices all over again. So it may be that in the generation of Avraham, the leaders got up and wrung their hands and said, woe to us, because the leader is gone. But now the same efforts, again, we're hearing repeatedly. Jewish people have no connection, can't use the Bible as their right to this land. And the Torah is teaching us that the only thing that we can use and the only thing that we need to use is our biblical connection to the land of Israel. Why? As we see so clearly from the connection between Avraham Avinu and the tomb of the patriarchs, because the Jewish people, through Avraham Avinu, through their celebration, their sanctification of life through action, Avraham Avinu taught us it's not a free ride, and it's not about privilege. It's about our willingness to take responsibility for teaching the whole world that there's only one God.